Hi guys. Everyone has a story and all of our stories are important. That's something I firmly believe. And as important as our individual stories are, I think it's important to recognize the fact that our individual stories are caught up in bigger stories. The bigger stories that shape and form us, like the stories of our family, the stories of our work, of our nations, the list goes on and on. And stories are really important to human beings because they tell us, amongst other things, how we got here. They tell us what our identity is. They tell us what's wrong with the world, who the bad guys are. And they also kind of tell us how to fix what's been broken. In some ways, stories, they provide a framework for telling us where we're going. And all big stories have a plot. You know, where is the story going? How is it developing? All big stories have a plot. And sometimes something happens in these big stories that has happened before. Some stories show us patterns. Things that have happened before happen again. They kind of explain the best stories. They use these patterns to tell us something deep about what's going on. You know, if something comes up again and again in a story, it's often the fruit of a deeper root. And so, actually, in God's story, the big story, I believe that we have a pattern like this taking place, something that is a fruit of a deeper root. And so, just to catch you up on the big story of God, God is the creator. That's the beginning of the story, and he makes everything, and he makes everything good. He makes humans in his image. And when I say that God makes everything good, I mean that's everything, but really fundamentally it's relationships. Relationship between us and him is good. Relationship between us and each other is good. Even relationship between us and the rest of creation, it's good. God makes it all good. He makes it perfect. But the bad guys in God's story are humans who rebel against God. And when they do that, the consequence is that everything that was good is now broken. And especially relationships. Relationship between us and God is broken, between us and each other, and even between us and the rest of creation. And one of the consequences of human rebellion, one of the fruits of that broken relationship between us and God, is that humans are exiled from the presence of God. They're exiled from the presence of God, which leads to death. However, God has a plan. Because God loves human beings. God loves his creation. God has a plan to fix everything, which includes, part of that plan is choosing a people who he's going to bless those people. And through that people, he is going to bring blessing to the whole world. And he gives this people, this is Israel, he gives this people his name. He reveals his character to them, and he reveals his heart. And we've looked at that in the past. And this people of Israel, they have a mixed history. Sometimes they're doing well, sometimes they're not doing so well. But they end up with leaders, kind of at the end, who lead them away from God. And the result of this is a pattern. Humans, when they rebelled against God, were exiled from his presence at the beginning of the story. And now here, after God's chosen a people to fix what's been broken and to be a blessing to the world, their bad leaders lead them away from God. And like the first humans, they're exiled from God's presence. And I think there's something important here for us to think about. Just because you know what the right thing is, or just because you have a relationship with someone who loves you, it doesn't mean you will automatically do the right thing. Israel knew the name of God. Israel knew the heart of God. Israel knew the character of God. Israel knew God, and they still chose to do the wrong thing. And, according to God's story, though, God has a plan. Even though the kings of Israel at the end led them away from God, God has a plan. He still wants to fix everything that's been broken. He still wants to bless all the nations of the earth. And if the kings of Israel led them the wrong way, then the answer, according to God, is for a true king to come who would lead them the right way. And so this what happens to the people of God in when they're exiled from God's presence, exiled from the land that God gave them, the people of God, they're literally taken. It's not figurative exile, it's literal exile. They're captured by their enemies. Another empire, the Babylonians, come and take them out of the land of Israel and take them into Babylon. But because God still loves his people, he makes them a promise, even now, even as they are now living in the land of their conquerors, living in the land of exile. Which brings me to this part of the Bible. It's written by a man named Daniel, who himself used to live in Israel, but is now captured and serving amongst the Babylonian Empire. He's kind of high up, he's a high official, and he has a vision. And this is the vision that Daniel sees while he's in Babylon in exile from the land of Israel. So Daniel says this: "As I looked, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days," that's God, "took his seat. His clothing was as white as snow. The hair of his head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and his wheels were all ablaze. A river of fire was coming out from before him. Thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000s times 10,000 stood before him. The court was seated, and the books were open. Then I continued to watch because of the boastful words the horn was speaking." The horn is like a picture of a king, of like a boastful king. "And I kept looking until the beast was slain and its body destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire. The other beasts here is imagery of human empires. The other beasts had been stripped of their authority but were allowed to live for a period of time. In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man." Son of man means human, "coming with the clouds of heaven. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and people of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed." So here's a vision that Daniel has from God, according to God's story, of what's happening in human geopolitics at the time. Kingdoms are rising and falling, and that's always going to happen. But actually one day a human being will go up on the clouds into the very presence of God, into the throne room of God. And in many ways, God is promising that a worthy son of man, a worthy human will come. He will be a king that will not be like the kings of Israel that led the people of God away from God. He will be a king that will lead people to God. And maybe that's what the world really needs. Someone to show us how, and also to make it possible to be truly human. Someone to show us how, and also to make it possible of how we can end exile and be back in the presence of God. Think about it. The world is more educated than ever. It's more empowered. It's more equipped, and yet brokenness still pervades. The story of Israel shows us that even if we know everything we should, humans will still be broken, still choose the wrong thing, still do the wrong thing, still exploit others, still be victims of exploitations ourselves. There must be something else that we need. You know, it's common to think that if only we have more education, more justice, more equity, more good governance, whatever it is that you think is missing, it's common to think we just need more of what's missing and then the world can be fixed. So a lot of those things I just mentioned, they're not bad things, they're good things, and we should have more of them. But I think Israel's story shows us that the world isn't lacking a whole bunch of education knowledge. Of course we need more. What it's fundamentally lacking is the fact that we're exiled from God's presence, and we need someone to lead us back into God's presence. Israel had the principles of flourishing, of human flourishing that God had given them. And Israel had relationship hand delivered to them. And that they were living in God's presence, just like the first humans. But just like the first humans, they rejected God's life-giving rule. They rejected God's leadership. They rebelled against God. Knowledge is powerful, absolutely, but humans are so broken that eventually our power, the knowledge that we have, the power that we have, the money that we have, is used against others instead of being used for them to bless them. So, according to God's story, even though there's a pattern of human failing, it happens at the beginning of the story, happens in the middle story, it happens, we see it all the time just looking out the window. There's human brokenness, human failing. Even though there's this pattern of humans failing God, leading to a broken relationship, God still wants to be in relationship with humans and will go to them even when they are in exile. That's what God does to Daniel. He speaks to Daniel, shows him about what he's going to do, shows him his plan. His ultimate plan to fix what's been broken is, according to what we've just read, according to God's story, is to raise up a true human being who will lead us all back into the presence of God. Because the presence of God, according to God's story, is where we are always meant to be. The presence of God, according to God's story, is where we are always meant to flourish. It's where we were made to flourish. Now, you might disagree with this story, that's fine. And we can talk about it right now. Actually, we're going to ask some questions and love to hear somehow your thoughts on this part of that big story. And so let me ask you this first question. Does this part of the story make sense of something you felt or experienced in your life? Maybe you know exactly what it's like to know the right thing, but you choose the wrong thing. Maybe you know exactly what it's like to have everything given to you, but then you kind of miss the opportunity somehow. That's okay. I think it's what it means to be human in many ways. let me ask you this question. The story of God has a pattern of humans rejecting God, leading to consequences like exile, amongst a whole bunch of others. But God pursuing them and wanting to fix what's been broken. That's the pattern. Humans reject God, leading to negative consequences, but God pursues them and wants to fix what's been broken, wants to undo those consequences. What do you think about this pattern? What does this pattern reveal about who God is according to God's story? What does it reveal about who humans are according to God's story? And what do you think this story is trying to say about us? I'd be interested in what you have to think about that. And finally, what do you think of the idea that there's something wrong with humans, that there's something so wrong with humans that even though we know more and more, there's always a temptation to use that knowledge for selfish reasons. Even though we're more rich than we've ever been, we still are envious, we're still greedy. Or even though we have all these things that the modern world has, we're still comparing ourselves to people who have more. Or we have all this kind of power, and instead of using it for good, sometimes we use it for bad. We use it to exploit others, to get ahead of others, to use other people like a stepping stone. Do you agree or do you disagree that there's something wrong with humans? Maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you think humans are good and there's other reasons. I'll just say this. God's story says a true human is the answer. I wonder if you disagree with the story, or maybe you do agree with the story, but you've observed just human culture. What do others say the answer is for humans? What do others say? What do other stories say is the answer for human brokenness? According to God's story, we need a true human being who will make it possible and show us the way, show us how we can be led back into the presence of God. That's the answer to human brokenness according to God's story. What do other stories say? And let me finish with this. Which story resonates with you the most? Which big story resonates with you the most? It might be God's story, it might be something else. That's fine. Love to hear your thoughts. All right, that's it from me. Thanks, guys.